Welcome to the Freight Project podcast, brought to you by Ceresys, a North American third-party logistics company providing shippers transportation management technology and solutions.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Freight Project podcast. On today's podcast episode, Ceresys welcomes Andrew Lynch, co-founder and president of Zipline Logistics, an award-winning logistics service provider that specializes exclusively in the transportation of retail consumer goods and food and beverage products. You'll get to learn about Andrew's background and how his experience working in carrier procurement and management at a Fortune 100 company prepared him well for the world of third-party logistics. On this episode, Andrew and I will talk about how in the retail space, it is vital that marketing, sales, and the supply chain and logistics teams collaborate to achieve shared goals of consistent logistics at the customer level, as well as a good shopping experience in the store. Andrew will also talk about why having the right carrier mix and how improved carrier relations is important for consistent logistics practices. He'll also provide some not so commonly known tips as it relates to being more carrier friendly that shippers should focus on to find capacity during this current and any capacity crunch. We'll conclude our conversation by getting Andrew's thoughts on why advanced technologies such as blockchain, AI, and the IoT get a lot of attention, but that focusing on real-life solutions to issues like labor shortage, safety, and capacity sourcing, instead of wasting so much breath on disruptions that won't take place for decades, is more productive for those who work in freight. We hope you enjoy this episode of the Freight Project Podcast. Hey, and thanks for joining us today, Andrew. Really appreciate you taking your time out to be a guest here on the Freight Project Podcast and lend your expertise to our listeners. I'm sure they're going to be able to learn a lot about you and what you do there at Zipline Logistics, especially as you manage the company on the day-to-day as the president. As with all of our guests, we want to make sure that we are able to get to know who you are before we get into our conversation. So can you tell us, Andrew, and our listeners a little more about who you are, what you do at Zipline on the day-to-day, and what Zipline Logistics' focus is in the marketplace?
Sure. Thanks for having me. So, Zipline was started about 11 years ago. My partners and I started our careers at a large, big box Fortune 100 3PL, and we just felt that the marketplace had room for a specialized operator. So, we chose to focus our efforts on customers who ship consumer products, so finished goods, and folks that deal with retail. So on one end, we serve the retailers. We manage their inbound transportation. And on the other end, we serve folks that sell through retail channels. At the time, we just felt that there was a gap in the service space in the market, and that someone really focusing on that niche could really add some value. And 11 years later, we've been one of the fastest growing 3PLs in the country for 8 straight years and continue to have our business model validated by the marketplace.
Well, hey, that's some staying power. That's pretty exciting. And it's obviously a big industry, and there are a lot of players and a lot of specialized players. And I think you and I can appreciate when the word logistics is bandied about how many different meanings that can have from so many different perspectives. So you definitely, I think, appreciate that very well. And as that co-founder of Zipline Logistics, and you mentioned, focusing on the consumer product goods, or often called the CPG space, you're working with shippers who are really keenly aware of making sure freight gets to their customers on time. Retailers, they are, really obsessed with that customer experience mantra, and rightly so. And so, marketers are collaborating with their supply chain folks, and they're doing all they can to combat what is known as the Amazon effect and to stay relevant. And so at the executive level, when we speak about collaboration between those department heads to achieve these shared goals of, consistent logistics at a customer level, as well as at a good shopping experience level in the store or online, how are you seeing those entities and those departments come together more and more? And how related is the marketing promise and the logistics promise today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really think that we're still sort of in that nascent phase where organizations are starting to really recognize the importance of collaboration across these functions. Logistics, I think when we opened our doors 11 years ago, logistics was very much siloed It was a cost center. It was a place where people just thought, this is a line item on my budget that I need to make as small as I possibly can. And so everything was sort of commoditized. And a big part of our marketing efforts, in our first, 8 or 9 years were really, really uphill because we had to educate folks that, trucks aren't really a commodity. Transportation services aren't really a commodity. And, we may be in a low point in this marketplace, but soon enough, it's going to be harder for you to meet those retailer demands. So the Amazon effect has been strangely positive for us because it's really helping to educate our customers on the importance of reliable logistics operation. As far as marketing and logistics come together, we're really seeing it as more than just those two departments. Operations, production, procurement, sales, marketing, and logistics are really all having to come together to put themselves in the optimum position to meet those retailer demands that are getting more and more stringent. We saw a recent study that we've been working off of that showed that customers experienced what are out of stocks in 1 out of 3 store visits. Those out of stocks can include like just not being able to find a person in the store to help them, all different categories, but 32% of those out of stocks literally meant that they went to go get a product at a store and the product just wasn't there. $1 trillion in lost sales to physical retailers. Sometimes that means that they just went down the street to another physical retailer, but a lot of times it means that that customer picked up their phone and ordered what they were looking for from Amazon. 24% of Amazon's retail revenue was attributed to that exact thing. So $35 billion.
Gosh. And, if they'd have just had their stuff on the shelves and stocked properly, it could have been a different situation. Wow, what an easy, nice win for Amazon, but a lot of opportunity for the clients at Zipline, right?
Yeah, a ton. And we work with so many emerging brands, and that's one of the points that we're really trying to get across is that, these large food and beverage manufacturers, right? General Mills and Kellogg's and Coca-Cola, they're getting their butts kicked by small emerging brands because that's what the consumer's buying, right? Zero sugar, all natural, non-GMO, organic, clean label. Those brands are taking up shelf space. And so there's a ton of competition within that space as well. But if you imagine how much pressure these retailers are under right now to make sure that whatever they promise to be on the shelves is actually on the shelves, that pressure is causing them to look at these emerging brands and say, look, if you can't, your product may be great, but if you can't get on my shelf, I don't have time for you. I can't have customers walking in here, not getting the product, trying out Amazon Fresh, realizing that it's fine for them, and then never coming back. So it's a huge, it's just a pressure cooker for both retailers and vendors right now. And yeah, great opportunity for small companies, mid-sized companies to kind of weaponize their transportation, their logistics operations, put themselves in a better position to ship efficiently, to ship at low cost, and to really shine against their competition when it comes to replenishment and store stocking.
Yeah. if I was a retailer, especially a big brand name that's, hopefully banking on my brand name to carry me through. And I, as an executive, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night because the reality is that the future of commerce seems less dependent upon what brand you're buying and more dependent upon how easy it is to get it and what's the experience to get it. So sounds like that collaboration between the execs, the marketing, the supply chain and ops people is super, super important. So let's get down to, beyond the strategy and kind of the atmosphere. Now let's get down to maybe some shipping strategies and specific carrier conversations. And I know one of the biggest things, we're kind of similar companies where you focus on CPG. We're kind of more in the industrial space, but at Ceresys, we do provide a TMS, a transportation management system, to help those industrial shippers with things like parcel, LTL, and full truckload. And one of the things that we notice when we first engage with a customer are a couple of things. One, they don't have any technology or really standard operating procedures, and that's scary. But they're getting by. They're doing what they have to do. They're trying to get the job done. It's getting harder without a strategy or process. And two, they don't really have a great carrier database. Either they just use the same one over and over because the guy gets back to them or gets them free tickets to the game, or they just don't have the time to ferret out and find the right carriers. From your perspective, why is having a broad carrier database important for a shipper, especially in today's environment, as you described?
So we actually, in CPG, of course, broad is we carry a very broad carrier database, right? So at Zipline, we have 25,000 carriers under contract that we leverage on behalf of our shippers. But for our shippers, what we really try to emphasize to them is it's not just about having a broad carrier base. It's really about having the right carrier base.
Yes.
In our space, broken promises, late deliveries, sales tactics that undercut relationships really can be devastating to the performance of folks shipping into retail, especially grocery retail and perishable items. You just really can't have a misaligned set of expectations. So we really focus our customers on, for each different, customer of theirs, each different retailer, each different distributor, really focusing on selecting the right group of carriers that's going to provide the best service first. And then we can turn around and use the buying power that we have to drill down costs a little bit. But, what we're really measuring is, how many partnerships do you have, real partnerships? And, by real partnership, we mean how transparent are those partnerships? Are you seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly? Are you being given opportunities to make changes that will help you spend less money with those partners? I think it's almost an oxymoron to say that, for us, a great customer, a great sales relationship is one where we're really pointing out to our clients how they can do less business with us. Because ideally we're helping them find ways to spend less money on transportation while still meeting those demands.
Yeah. If you're doing your job right. And it sounds like, broad carrier database is important. The ability to have and tap into different and a broad set of players. But the key and ultimately where you want to go to is how are you, grading those carriers? What does that relationship look like? Do you have a carrier scorecard? Are you getting the data you need to effectively grade them? So those are really, important things to mention to a shipper. And, they might get mired down in everything they have to accomplish. They're like, really, Andrew? I need to now grade them? I can't even find good ones. We're in the middle of a freaking capacity crunch here. And, we get that. That's tough. We've been hearing about this capacity crunch, and I know I've seen coverage in previous capacity crunches, and there's never been the coverage in this one because there's just so many factors. The driver shortage, the economy's better. Carriers are, consolidating. It's a different landscape. And so, you're hearing that, obviously, working at a 3PL, and it can really sting some shippers who aren't prepared for it. So what are some not so commonly known tips as it relates to being more carrier friendly that maybe shippers should focus on in order to find that capacity that they're struggling to find today?
Yeah, it's a really important topic right now. For us specifically, and the way that we position ourselves with our clients, we really try to spend our time helping them create those cross-functional dynamics that we talked about earlier, right? So, using the tools that we provide, we provide a kind of a shipper intelligence tool that gives people the opportunity to look into their data, but it also kind of helps them show what behaviors are affecting their costs and their service performance. And, we really think it's critical to start building flexibility into your distribution network. So, when you talk about a capacity crunch, there's an enormous amount of competition for every single truck. And the best way for customers to be able to capture that capacity is to allow themselves the opportunity to, be flexible based on the best matches for their service needs. What we always tell our customers is that, real conflict between you and your customers, your retail customer, comes from misaligned expectations, right? So sales and customer service teams can do a ton of work on the front end in order to kind of mitigate that conflict before it happens, right? To work with retailers and explain, from their perspective that, we do have a really, really challenging capacity environment right now. We need to be able to hold our costs down so that we don't have to turn around and put price increases through to you at our next, pricing opportunity. So really, really, I mean, everyone's aware of this capacity crunch. So it's not, like you have to convince anybody that it's going on. And once you have that alignment across your customers, you can start sort of optimizing your shipping schedules and really, really managing your logistics and transportation operations to try to, still hit those internal price goals. Right now, we also hear a lot of folks talking about being a shipper of choice. And this may be something that is more specific to consumer products. It's probably less specific to industrial products, but
it's picking up. I got to tell you, even the industrial side is having some struggles. I think it's just like in the supply chain. I think the retailers hit it, and it kind of trickles down, to what maybe is not as attractive freight to carriers. So yeah, there's shipper choices is definitely bubbling up on our side too.
More and more. And the thing on the CPG side is that most of our customers, right, even huge brands, most of them aren't actually, they don't own the facilities where their product's being manufactured, right? A ton of consumer products, a ton of food and bev, these are being made by co-manufacturers, right? Private label manufacturers that, they really specialize on the operations of running a lean manufacturing function, as opposed to these branded products that are really more branding and marketing organizations than they are operations. And the issue that we have is that, if you're, a potato chip company, ABC potato chips, and you're manufacturing at 3 or 4 different co-manufacturers across the country, you're really not in control of being, positioned as a shipper of choice.
That's a lot of trust. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, we try to, influence our clients to, when you're making selections around new manufacturers or new co-packers, to do a little bit of that research within their due diligence. It's certainly not going to be the primary factor, but it should certainly be something that that is considered. And then really, focusing on letting your logistics partners smooth out some of those bumps. We have plenty of CPG clients that have very difficult to work with co-manufacturers and co-packers. And to me, and I would imagine that you guys do a lot of the same work, the logistics operator can do a ton of work to affect, being sort of that shipper of choice by just clearly communicating the parameters of a shipment or clearly communicating how a shipper operates. That again, the worst thing you can have are misaligned expectations. I mean, that's where all the conflict in this space comes from. And so open and honest and transparent communication, I think, does the most towards having continuous, reliable capacity available.
Yeah, and I think that's why you're starting to see more shippers turn to 3PLs. It just gives you that strategic partner who can kind of have a holistic view of your operations, keep it, keep you honest, make sure you're thinking about things that maybe you hadn't considered because the 3PL has, that knowledge base of thousands of other similar experience with other companies. So you can kind of proactively avoid any of those clogs that might come up along the way. But that's the key. And it's a soft skill maybe. And I think it's an important one. And it's great to see executives and even from an educational standpoint, some of these grads kind of have more of this business and strategy mindset applied towards logistics and transportation. Executives are really starting to see that as a competitive advantage, just as you said it previously. And they're having that conversation finally with their logistics managers or even the transportation coordinators who are lower down in that hierarchy on the importance of communication, the importance of proper expectations, the importance of strategy. So it's good to see companies lean on things like technology or data or partnerships to bring them out of that process, the weeds of process, to get that strategic mindset. And so, when it comes to that involves carrier relations, that involves technology, data, freight, and of course, technology. So in our market, and I really love to, talk to executives like yourself who are, helping shippers become more efficient in their supply chain and their processes and logistics and transportation. What do you think from a technology perspective that the industry really needs to look at over the next few years to make a difference and stay efficient as possible?
So, to me, I think the thing that I probably lament the most as someone that spends a lot of time sort of thinking, big picture transportation and logistics is just that the attention, the shiny objects that pull everyone's attention away from actual solutions to today's problems. And, you hear so much, God, for the last 2 years, when did you not hear about autonomous trucks and how, the autonomous trucks were going to be taking over the world? I go to trade shows and, there's food shippers out there that are just saying, yeah, what do I need a 3PL for? Everything's going to be, done by robots in a couple of years anyway. And it's like, gosh, you couldn't be further from the truth on that. And it's doing really nothing for us. Being a truck driver is one of the most stressful jobs in America. It's one of the most dangerous jobs in America. I recently read that a truck driver is something like 8 times more likely to be killed or injured on the job than being a law enforcement officer.
Oh,
so it's an extremely dangerous job. And there's a lot of technology being applied right now that you see in today's cars and that are being applied to today's trucks that make the job safer, that make it less stressful, things that keep them in their lanes or keep them at a certain distance from the cars ahead and behind them, things that make it easier to back into docks, right? All these things that are coming into play to make it a better job. And no one seems to be talking about that, right? And here we are struggling to find, 60,000, not just truck drivers, but typically we need 60,000 long haul truck drivers, right? Because the driver population has all trickled into the best positions, which are those local and regional delivery positions that get them home every night. So we need 60,000 of the toughest job in America. And instead of doing anything to make it look more attractive, we're explaining to, this generation of high school grads that, yeah, 1, you can't drive a truck until you're 21. And 2, by the time you get there, it's probably going to be done by a robot anyway, so don't bother.
That's real motivating.
Exactly. Who doesn't want to be a truck driver? I mean, we're really narrowing the labor pool.
So what you're saying, Andrew, is you're going to run in 2020 for president, Andrew for president, and you got a plan to save the truckers?
My platform isn't complete. That's going to be more like 2024. Maybe 2028.
The truck driver candidate. I love it.
Yes. Trucking hasn't made all my hair turn gray yet, and I think that I would do better as a candidate if I were a silver fox.
There you go. So give us a couple of years. Yeah, a little few more gray hairs. We'll get a couple votes.
Yeah, it's not going to take that long at this rate. But we see the same thing with environmental impacts and green transportation, right? I just spoke at a clean fuels event down in Southern Ohio a couple months ago, and a lot of what I talked about there is that there are so many small changes that we can make to the behavior of drivers and to the actual equipment that can bring a truck from the 5.5 miles per gallon all the way to 10 miles per gallon. And make huge impacts on, how much CO2 we're putting into the air. Instead of any of that, being, rewarded or focused on, you just see pictures of Tesla's, space age looking electric truck that, probably will never be in production. And I just feel like people don't act when they think there's some magic pill coming down the line, down the pike for them. And so instead of taking some of those little steps that may add up to a more challenging work environment, we wait around for some sort of miracle from above.
Well, I like it. You
Yeah.
set the right expectations. You have pragmatism, realism, and you're not distracted by shiny objects. That sounds like a great partner to have in a 3PL.
Thanks, man.
Well, hey, Andrew, man, I really appreciate the time and being a guest here on the Freight Project podcast. We definitely learned a lot of good stuff today. Some good tips for shippers out there. Hope to have you on in the near future. And thanks for being a guest today.
I'd love to. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care. And for all of our listeners on the Freight Project podcast, make sure you tune in next week for another episode. Take care.